This episode takes us to North Bay, Ontario, the gateway of the North and the home of an underground military bunker, also known as NORAD. Let's keep that one to ourselves and not let Putin hear about that. Too soon? Now, Shannon Kochie, age 39, she was a resident of North Bay. She lived downtown at 145 Duke Street, and everybody described her the same way. A kind-hearted soul. Even when I was doing research of this story, that was the phrase that was used to describe her in almost every single article of this story, was how kind-hearted and such a good soul that she had. Now, Shannon, she was in a short-term relationship with this man that she met named Ryan Neal. He was also of North Bay and also resided at 145 Duke Street in the basement residence. This house was divided into apartments. So they together resided in the basement together at 145 Duke Street in North Bay. Again, it was a short-term relationship between Shannon and Ryan. So it wasn't too serious, but it was serious. You know how things are at the beginning. Just infatuation with each other. And that could have been the case here. But it was almost like there was red flags right away. He gave off a vibe. No one really said too much about it, but he gave off a vibe where people were telling Shannon, "Hey girl, you can do a little bit better than this guy." On December 14th, 2015, Shannon's family was having a gathering. One would assume that it's in December, it would be for Christmas. Shannon never showed up. Her family tried calling her, couldn't get a hold of her. And for her not to show up, especially after she was expressing that she's going to be there, started getting everybody worried. So a couple of her family members were like, you know what? We're going to head down to Duke Street and we're going to go check in on Shannon and make sure everything's okay with her. Two of Shannon's relatives, they arrived at 145 Duke Street, North Bay, to go check on Shannon. When they went down to the basement door of her apartment and started knocking and announced, like, "Hey Shannon, it's us. Why didn't you show up to the family function? We're checking to see if you're okay." All they heard was a blood-curdling scream for help coming from Shannon inside the unit. Just screaming, "Help, help, help." So the family members, they start backing up, and immediately they hear the voice of Ryan, who is threatening them through the door. Now, there wasn't any context of what the threat actually was, but it was enough to make the two family members back away from the door and dial 911. Now, with the screams of Shannon still being heard coming through the door, her screaming, "Help me, help me, help me." Not long after the 911 call was placed by the family, two police officers from the North Bay Police Department showed up and went down to the door of the residence, and they could smell something burning. So the police officers, they breached the door. They go inside, and there's a small fire that had been set on the top of the stove inside the kitchen. One would assume it was Ryan trying to start a fire to torch the whole apartment building up in flames. One of the officers extinguished the fire on the top of the stove, and they made contact with Ryan. He had barricaded himself inside one of the ensuite bathrooms in the bedroom of the home. So the police went in. There was a little bit of, "I'm not coming out. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are." And eventually the police breached the ensuite and arrested Ryan. And on the floor lay Shannon, motionless, with a pool of blood around her. Now the North Bay police, they have Ryan in custody, so they escort him out of the house. Now their focus is Shannon, who is laying on the floor in a pool of blood. The police approached, tried life-saving measures, EMS arrived, and Shannon met the criteria of being deceased. So all life-saving measures were stopped, and the coroner was notified, and she came in. Shannon had been murdered. She had been stabbed multiple times by Ryan. Now, I wish there was more that I could say that Ryan Neal, this piece of shit that he rotted away, got found guilty, but no. When this went to trial, he was found not criminally responsible. He had a bunch of underlying mental issues. He made crazy claims like when this happened, he didn't sleep for days. He was on LSD and amphetamines. He was seeing a portal to another world that when Shannon's family arrived, he didn't think it was them. He thought it was people coming to kill him. That Shannon, she can't be dead. She can't die. That she's a demon and that she's a witch. So she's not dead. She can't die. It's impossible for her to die. And while he was stabbing her, he thought he was killing a demon. He didn't think he was attacking Shannon whatsoever. Ryan continued with this crazy rhetoric even going as far as claiming that people were drilling holes in his ceiling and spying on him. So, alright, the guy was a full box of Fruit Loops. So, he was found not criminally responsible and held in Penetang at the Waypoint Center for Mental Health. And however, he did in 2018, under review, ask to be transferred out of Waypoint, which is like a maximum security if you want to consider it. He wanted to get transferred back to North Bay, Ontario, to be held at the North Bay Regional Hospital in the mental health wing. You're a freaking murderer and you want to be held in an emergency room, pretty much. Like, what the f***'s wrong with you? He still continues to stay at Waypoint Center. He will not be getting out anytime soon. The media has been pretty quiet about this story. There hasn't been too much information regarding Shannon's murder or the process of Ryan Neal. Just a little bits and pieces, which is unfortunate because this is a story that needs to be heard. Shannon was an innocent 39-year-old woman from North Bay, Ontario, got in a short-term relationship, and it's one of those, you know, you never judge a book by its cover. And sometimes those little flaws you find in people that you ignore, they're major red flags. And how horrible is that? Right before Christmas, you're supposed to go to a family gathering, you don't show up, and man. So that's the story of Shannon Kochie, 39-year-old woman from North Bay, Ontario, supposed to show up at her family's house for a Christmas get-together. They didn't hear from her by 4 p.m., went over, and at her residence got the shock of a lifetime. And Ryan Neal, he's now rotting away in the puzzle factory at Waypoint. Of course, once again, I'd like to thank you for tuning in and watching another episode of Horror Lore. Please like, please comment, please share, please subscribe, and you never know, the next story I'll be telling could be about you or somebody you know. Thanks again, and until next time.